Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good morning if you're joining us from the US, where I'm based as well. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. This is episode 4 already, which is really unbelievable. To think that it's been 4 weeks since we started this live series on the Made of Millions YouTube channel. I believe we're being streamed on Facebook as well today for the very first time. So if you're joining us through Facebook, please be sure to say hello and let us know anything you'd like to right now, how you're feeling, how you're doing, how this weekend was, where you're joining us from, any other information that you want to share with us. So in case this is your first time joining in for this live series. My name is Teodora Pavkovic. I'm a psychotherapist and a parenting coach. I'm based in New York City, and I'm an advisory board member of Made of Millions, the organization which is aiming to raise awareness about mental health, and they're bringing us live across to you today. So, like I said, today is episode 4 of my 5-part digital wellness series. Next week, I'll be talking about a topic that is especially relevant right now, I think, given that we're all confined to our homes and we're doing all of our socializing, all of our learning, and all of our work from home. So next week I'll be talking about technology and its role in the classroom and in the workplace. And today I'm talking about one of my absolute favorite topics within this kind of larger field of digital wellness. I said that last week as well. Episode 3 was on the topic of children and technology. My other favorite topic to talk about is parenting in the age of technology, and of course the two of them are very tightly intrinsically linked. So for those of you who did watch last week's episode, I have to apologize to you uh, because I'm not the most tech savvy person. I didn't actually enlarge my slides enough for you, and I had a lot of data on there and a lot of graphs. So I did set the intention this time to make sure to change that. There we go. That should be easier to see now. My slides should be bigger than I am, and hopefully this will make it easier to see. I'm not sharing too many statistics with you this time, but I will be sharing some information about parental technology use. And again, I will be referencing a bunch of research that has been carried out by Common Sense Media. So if they're an organization that you're not familiar with, I definitely recommend that you check them out. And if you're interested in having some more data, some more statistics about not just parental technology use, but technology use when it comes to children, both young and older, I would definitely recommend that you visit their website. So let's get started. I want to begin with a little bit of humor. I really think that's the only thing that's going to get us through this period. Humor on the one hand, and I think imagination on the other hand. But this is a tweet that I recently came across that I've found to be one of the funniest I've seen so far about the situation that we're in right now. And this is a post that said, "Well, my 3-month trial of 2020 is over. Canceling my subscription." If you do feel this way, please give us a little wave or a smiley face in the comment section. I know a lot of us definitely feel this way, and I've really appreciated reading a lot of these comments. I do think they make it a lot easier for all of us to get through this, whether you are a parent or you're not. This is another one that I really wanted to share with you, and I really encourage you to check out the Awkward Yeti. So the artist who creates these very adorable, very accurate also in some ways, cartoons about this kind of typical relationship that we associate with the heart and the brain. So in this case, the heart is saying, "Look, brain," and it's only paying attention to the good. There's a little butterfly there on top of that pile. And then the brain, on the other hand, is saying, "Now, heart, can't you see that I'm busy?" Really deeply investigating all of the bad. So I think this is another really interesting kind of perspective to keep in mind in this idea that to a great extent, not 100%, but to a great extent, in a lot of moments in our everyday lives, we have this opportunity to kind of toggle, to use a very tech term, between looking at what is really good and being very grateful, and looking at perhaps the stuff that is not that bad. And I think one of the most important tasks for all of us, for parents in particular who are so overwhelmed right now, even more so than before, is really to take control of our focus and our attention as much as we can, to try and shift into not looking at what is good in that kind of blind, sort of happy-go-lucky kind of a sense, but to really look at the things in our environment that are actually going well, and to remind ourselves of all the good things that we're able to do in these very difficult circumstances. And then this is one that a poster that I've seen shared vastly, mostly by parents and teachers. So I wanted to share this with you as well. And again, you can see that this wasn't put together by me. This was put together by the counselingteacher.com. The artwork was done by Carrie Stevens Art. So I encourage you to check them out. And again, it's a wonderful kind of perspective on the things that we can control and the things that we can't control, and just how important it is to, first of all, be able to have the awareness of these things, but then also to be able to shift into that circle in the middle and that space where we can really look at the things that we want to control. And a lot of what I'll be talking to you about over the next kind of half an hour or so really relates to the ways in which we can control our technology use as parents, but then the technology use of our children as well. That's really one of kind of the core principles of digital wellness, is to have that control over how we use technology and not let it control us. And if you'd like a little bit more information about kind of some of the basics of digital wellness, I encourage you to go back and look at episode 1 of this live series, where I talked about some of the kind of the core concepts of digital wellness. So because we have such limited time to talk about something that I'll typically spend days talking about when I'm doing workshops and trainings and so on, I wanted to categorize as much of these ideas for you as possible. So the first categorization that I want us to think about as we talk about this is, what are the different settings kind of in which we see technology use within families? And this also reflects to a great extent the reason why I decided as a psychotherapist to start focusing on technology use in families and technology use by children, but parents as well. To begin with, kind of in early 2016, I was living in Singapore, which is a country that highly values technology. What I was starting to notice is a lot of children using technology on their own, whether they were in the presence of parents, for example, sitting on a bus right next to mom or dad or a grandparent, or they were just kind of alone in their rooms and the parents were somewhere in the house. But children using technology, and that's what you can see in the top there in that picture. And that was the first thing that got me thinking about, well, how does this impact child development? For one, obviously I've worked with children for many years, and that's always my first question: how does this impact how the child evolves through their lifetime? But then also, how does this impact the parent-child connection, which we know is absolutely vital for the child to be able to develop in a healthy kind of a way? What happens when you insert the device between the child and the parent? So for a while, maybe for about a year or so, I really was primarily focused on children, and I was only thinking about and working with children, really observing child behavior around tech. And then I realized that not just myself, but a lot of other practitioners in this field kind of missed out on the parental role in this whole story. So while we were looking at the kids, it was kind of a situation where no one was really looking at the parents to see what they were doing, what was happening with them while kids were using technology. So if you look at that picture on the right, this is another scenario that we see where it's not the child necessarily using the tech, but it's the parents using the tech, either in front of the child, like in this example, or away from the child. Again, either at work or in the same house or in the same room. But that really focuses on parental tech use, which is, of course, what we're going to be talking about today. And then third and final, we have this kind of situation at the bottom there of the screen that you can see, where there is this co-using or co-viewing, which a lot of, again, experts in this field, practitioners, the American Academy of Pediatrics, a lot of other organizations that are involved in this really encourage. And so for me, over the past kind of 3 or 4 years, as I've been focusing on this, the way I have conceptualized these different scenarios is that when it comes to that image on the right, where parents are very consumed by tech while the children are right there, this is one area that we want to really limit as much as possible, this form of technology use within the family, if not get rid of it altogether. When it comes to children using technology, we know that it's a very complex topic. I talked about it last week. We want to make sure, especially for very young children, that we limit that kind of isolated use of technology. As they get older, we of course want to make sure we're exposing them to this technology simply because they need it to function in this world, but in very conscious and intentional ways. And finally, of course, the main thing that I encourage nowadays in particular is really this co-using and co-viewing, parents and children together, even when we're talking about younger children, because what we want them to be aware of course, is the kind of digital world that they're going to enter once they get a little bit older. So as long as it's supervised and age appropriate, that is absolutely the type of technology use within families that we want to encourage. So screen time itself, just kind of as a number, is not that useful to talk about. And I think that the next couple of slides illustrate just how kind of pointless and meaningless numbers are without putting them into an actual context. So the data that I'm going to show you in the next few slides really relates to how parents use technology. And if you're a parent watching us right now, I encourage you to think about whether this reflects your own technology use when you're in the home. So again, this research comes from Common Sense Media. You can definitely type in these titles into their website, and this will take you to those full reports when you can get a lot more information. So 9+ is the hours spent on screen media, any kind of screen media. One of the interesting findings there is that less than 2 hours is actually spent on work. So a lot of this is based on communication, based on entertainment as well. 78% of parents believe that they're good media and tech models for their kids, which is a pretty nice number. 56% are concerned that their kids may get addicted. So addiction, although I'm not a fan of using that word necessarily, but this was a word used by parents. It is a very, very big concern. That's one of the biggest ones. In fact, some of the other ones are cyberbullying and safety online, of course. 85% said that monitoring their child's tech use is important for their safety. This is, of course, a number that I would like to see get much, much higher. So the closer we get to 100%, the better. And then 94%, and I'm sure a lot of them would agree with that now, again, say that tech supports their kids with their schoolwork and their education. 62% keep their phones within reach of their beds. This is for parents. Last week, I shared some stats on teenagers. I think it's a lower percentage, but it was very close to 50% who say the same thing. One of the most worrying findings is that 61% check their mobile device within 30 minutes of falling asleep, which means they'll wake up once they've fallen asleep and then check their phones, usually for things like notifications, not necessarily to check what time it is. 52% say that they spend too much time on their mobile devices. And this is quite an impressive figure for me because it really does indicate a certain level of awareness, which is always a really great first step. 45% say that they feel addicted, and nearly the same number actually feel that they're very distracted. And so again, you have this idea of addiction and distraction coming in, which I think are two of the most important ones. And again, I encourage you to consider how often you feel those things as well when it comes to using your technology use. 54% have said that they argue with their kids or their mobile device use less than once a day. So we're talking about a number of arguments during the week, but not necessarily every single day. And this number has actually changed since Common Sense Media first started asking this question. It seems that fewer parents are arguing with their kids now. Now, if you are a parent who's been arguing with your kids for a few years, you'll be able to answer the question best of, does this mean that kids are more compliant now, or does this mean that you've just grown tired of having this argument? But that's 52%. 54, sorry, that was 54%. 55% say that the use of their mobile device has had no impact on their relationship with their kids, which is another really kind of good, interesting statistic. Of course, it does leave with almost another half who say that it has affected their relationship. So, like I said before, we've definitely seen this infiltration of the device into the parent-child connection. These are some stats that I shared last week as well. This was, again, looking at both addiction and distraction. I'm, of course, not going to read all of these to you, but I think the most important takeaway from this is that it's not just the teenagers who are experiencing the sense of being distracted by their devices, by social media in particular as well, and who think their parents are distracted. Parents feel this as well. And so, in a lot of these cases, we see that somewhere around 50% of parents feel that they're very distracted. They feel that they're very addicted. A certain percentage feels that their devices are affecting the way they're interacting with their children. So that is really the kind of the main concern for me, is this infiltration of the device into the parent-child connection and causing a lot of discord. Again, I would encourage you to go back to episode 1 and have a look at some of the concepts that I was talking about that really indicate to us why it can be so difficult to control our technology technology use. Part of it, of course, has to do with our own behaviors, with our own habits. A lot of it really is down to our own kind of personal responsibility. But one very huge chunk of it really is down to how this technology is engaged, how it is marketed, how it is designed to kind of fit seamlessly into our lives. Seamless is one of the most common words that is typically used. So when talking about digital hygiene within the family, and when I'm talking to parents, I always tell them that the first step is really self care. So you always hear this message when you're on an airplane. You always need to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you put it on your child or on anybody else around you who needs help. And I think this is an image that I use across all the different types of work that I do, the different clients I work with. But for parents, I think this is incredibly important. And especially now, like I said, when so many of you are feeling so incredibly overwhelmed, you've taken on even more roles than you had before. With the quarantine and the physical distancing and working from home and learning from home that we're experiencing right now. So there are a few different kind of ideas that I want to share with you, very, very short and to the point ideas that I want to share with you. If you'd like any more about any of this, please feel free to get in touch with me. In the interest of time, we can't go into too much detail about this. But to begin with, I would really encourage you to test the state of your digital wellness. So you should be able to see, and once I'm done with the presentation, I will check back in our comment section. You should see a link there for a digital wellness survey that was put out by an organization that I work with and that I'm a member of, the Digital Wellness Collective, the first of its kind in the world, really. They just put out a survey that is also the first of its kind that will help you investigate and look into your digital habits, how your digital tech use makes you feel, and where you are in a number of different parameters. So I would encourage you to do that as a first step. Together with that, I would really recommend, if you aren't that sure about how much time you're spending on your technology, remember the average is about 9 hours or so for parents. I would encourage you to use any of the apps and the trackers that are out there that are available. A lot of people are really, really shocked by what they find in the end in terms of how much time they're spending on their different devices. Another really, really important recommendation is to really try and keep the phone outside of your bedroom as much as you can. For the most part, people, and I've used this same excuse myself, I'll have to be honest, the main reason people give for keeping it in their bedroom is that they need it as an alarm clock. And if that really was all that we were using it for, that would be perfectly fine. But as you could see from some of the data I shared earlier, we have a huge number of people who wake up at night within that kind of 30-minute period after they fall asleep in order to check their phone. So obviously it's something that's distracting us well past the point at which we fall asleep. And it's not entirely true that we actually only use it as something to wake us up in the morning. So as much as you can, keep it out of your room, charge it outside of the room. The whole family can charge all of their devices in one place. That's another really good tip. Turn off the notifications. One of the main reasons being is that really helps you gain control over your device instead of the device controlling you. Obviously, you have no control over who is going to send you a text or an email or like or going to share your comment. That can happen throughout the day, right? There's no such thing as switching off our social media or the digital world, really. But if you switch off those notifications and set up times for yourself throughout the day when you're going to check on them, you're doing a really huge job there and taking a big step into controlling your own technology use. A very, very tough one, but one that I know people have had a lot of positive feedback on, is changing their screen into grayscale. It is a very difficult thing to do. So if you can, that's incredibly admirable. Try to keep your phone and your tablet safe during the day. You're needing to use your laptop or your desktop for most of your work. Try to keep the other mobile devices out of sight. You will see that a lot of different organizations have made these little sleeping bags for various devices, typically for smartphones. National Day of Unplugging is one I would encourage you to check out. I have that little pouch, which I actually wanted to show you, but it's a little bit too far away from me right now. But it's a pouch that I started using for the National Day of Unplugging on that day. And the really interesting kind of behavioral outcome that I noticed in myself was it really did help me forget about my phone for long periods of time, right? Not just the typical kind of 30 seconds or a minute that we tend to forget about our phones. So even covering it with something or just keeping it out of eyesight, even though we know it still does impact our ability to focus and pay attention, it still really can go a long way in helping you to control what you're actually focusing on in that moment. This is just one of the ways of building boundaries around your tech use. I will talk about that a little bit more just in a minute. But really, the idea is to think about when we're using the tech, which form are we using? So what kind of screen-based device we're using, why we're using it, and where we're using it as well. And I feel a lot of those questions are especially becoming important right now. That our whole or most of our lives really are happening on our digital devices, and for the most part on our screen-based devices. And one question that I always really love to ask, and this is because of my background in psychotherapy and because I use a lot of emotional intelligence in my work, is how do we want technology to make us feel? And that can really impact especially the way you use social media in terms of who you follow and what types of comments you read and how much time you want to spend on there anyway. So that's one of the things I would really encourage you to investigate how you feel when you're using your technology and whether you're happy with that, with the ways in which you feel, or if you want to change it. And if there are ways in which you want to change that, if you want to say feel less afraid, a really important thing right now would be to try and minimize the amount of time that you spend consuming media that is related to the situation we're going through right now. You want to stay informed and you want to know all of the kind of basic, most important pieces of information. But if you're checking in on that every hour, on the hour, you're unlikely to feel very good and to feel calm and collected, which is what we all need to try to do as much as we can right now anyway, in order to help ourselves and to help our families as well. This is what I was talking about just now, related really to self-care. I wanted to share just a few, again, few very short tips for you, and I could talk about these for many hours, but I will keep it very brief right now because these are the three kind of very basic ideas that I think are important for people to consider, for parents to consider when it comes to what are the kinds of the habits and the kinds of behaviors that we want to see in our children when it comes to the ways in which they use tech and the ways in which one day they will use social media and communicate with others online and so on. So the three core concepts here are modeling, sharenting, and technoference. Modeling, you see in the picture up on top, I think it's a pretty kind of self-explanatory concept. Our kids never fail to copy what we do, and sometimes they'll do it in very subtle ways. Oftentimes, you'll hear parents say, "I don't know where they saw that. I don't know where they heard that." They're listening all the time. I like to say that small children, in particular, are like little sponges. They're absorbing everything around them, and they're also like little radars. And so they're constantly detecting what is going on in the environment, and they're always absorbing it. And they tend to then kind of recreate it and reproduce it and kind of throw it back at us. So really, whenever you're using your tech, at this point, it's when you're in the home, but at one point, once you're able to go back outside, when you're outside as well, it's really important to be aware of how we're using our technology and the impact that's having on kids around us. So one of the things that I started practicing was, like I said, I'm based in New York City, so I take the subway a lot. One of the things I started doing was if I was on my phone and I noticed, especially younger children around me, looking at me, trying to kind of make eye contact, I would put my phone away and I would look at them and I would smile at them and I would keep the phone away until either they left or I left. So I feel like we have a huge amount of personal responsibility there to really model those good behaviors. Sharenting is a concept that's been around for a little bit, but I'm always surprised to see that not everybody knows what it is. It just basically means parents sharing information, photos primarily of their children online. And this was research that was done in the UK. I believe it was 2 years ago at this point. But some of the statistics here are quite staggering. And a lot of the times parents aren't really aware of a lot of this. So you see here that about 51% of parents offered personal information that could identify a child's location. And again, of course, I'm sure they didn't do this intentionally, but we're sharing information about ourselves all of the time. So it could be things like a child was maybe wearing a jacket that had their school's logo on it, and maybe the name of the school was behind them, or something like that. So there's certain kind of tips there that parents can really keep in mind when it comes to sharing information about their kids, especially when kids are very young. One of the reasons being that we're now hearing from the kids who are now kind of teenagers. They're 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, that have grown up online, not just because they've placed themselves online, which they're doing now that they're using social media themselves, but because their parents started placing them online from a very, very early age. And a lot of the times, kids are not reacting very positively to this. They're not reacting very positively to the kind of a sort of online persona that has been created, kind of without their knowledge a lot of times, and without their consent. So that's another thing to think about. It's not just the safety and security, which is, like I said before, a big concern for parents, but it's also about the type of information we're putting out there for our kids that then once they're 13, 14, 15, 16, they're going to have access to, and all of their friends and their peers, their teachers potentially are going to have access to that same information. So it's really about thinking a little bit more kind of down the line and thinking about how is my child going to react to this in 15 or 16 or 17 years. The final one is technoference, and this is something that I talked about last week as well. When it comes to kids, it's another really good example of what I was saying before in terms of a device kind of being inserted between the parent and the child. And this is based on originally research that was done in the early 2000s at Harvard University, a professor called Dr. Edward Tronick, who did this, what he called the still-faced paradigm. Basically, what he had moms do, I think primarily moms with their little babies, is interact with them for a little bit in a very lively way, and then turn around and create this, or put on a still face and just sit there like that with their babies, which is a very difficult thing to do. And the psychologist basically observed this behavior and recorded what the babies were doing, how they were behaving, how they were feeling, how their behavior changed, kind of from second to second. And what they found was that babies become incredibly distressed after a little while. At first, they try to engage and they try to stimulate mom, to provoke mom, and then when they see that there's absolutely no reaction from her whatsoever, she seems completely disengaged, then what you see in that picture begins to happen. They become incredibly distressed. They start to cry. They start to kind of throw themselves around. They really experience a huge amount of distress. And this experiment in a similar form was recently completed by a colleague and a friend of mine at Hunter College, Dr. Tracy Dennis Tawari, who's also a member of kind of our digital wellness collective, our digital wellness movement, where she repeated the same experiment, but she instructed parents to be on their phones and to not react in any way to their children when they try to engage with them. And of course, you won't be surprised to know that she found very much the same thing happening with kids, that they were experiencing a huge amount of distress. They were trying to plead. Oftentimes they would try to beg. Oftentimes they would act out to try and get mom or dad's attention. And then ultimately when they'd fail, they would become very, very hopeless and helpless and incredibly distressed. So this is something that I would really encourage you to pay attention to, those really micro moments, especially when your children are very little, when that connection, that ability to reach out and get a reaction from you is broken, because of the technology use. And it goes back into what I was saying during the first couple of slides, that technology use of parents when the child is around, but the child is not involved in any way in what the parent is doing. So technoference is a very, very big one. These 5 tips, again, very briefly, I wanted to share with you. To read a lot more about each one, I would encourage you to head over to the link that I share with you here. That is the blog section of my website. I did an interview where I talked about some of the ways in which we can help children navigate the digital age. And again, I just wanted to kind of very briefly plant some of these ideas in your brain in case you haven't been thinking in this direction already. But these are some of the steps that we can really take in order to not just protect children, because that is important as well, but also to direct them. We want to protect, but we want to direct as well, so that one day when they're kind of out there in the digital world on their own, they know how to use it in the best possible way. No one uses it in a perfect way. We don't know what that looks like yet. But these are the 5 tips. The first one is really to, from the get-go, try and create healthy habits around technology. And again, that relates to some of the questions I mentioned earlier. Why am I using it? Where am I using it? What form of technology am I using? How is it making me feel? Am I happy with that? Do I want to change that a little bit? How much of it am I going to use? I said earlier that screen time has already kind of become an outdated term. I think that actually what we're experiencing right now with this physical distancing, quarantine, spending so much time at home and on screens, I think the concept of screen time actually is becoming important again. We're spending so much time on our screens that what I'm hearing a lot of people saying, and it's me included actually, is that just being on the screen is starting to become incredibly stressful. And it doesn't matter what it is that we're doing on it, whether it's work, whether we're FaceTiming with friends, or we're using an app to connect with them, whatever it is starting to become incredibly tiring. And screens do have the ability to do that to us in very physiological ways, in psychological ways as well. So it's really about creating those habits and choosing how we want to use technology. Setting boundaries based on your values is a really important one. I did a series of interviews with moms about their values and how they help their children use technology in a responsible way in the digital age. Because of everything that's happened, there's been a little bit of a delay with me releasing these interviews, but I will do very soon. What I found based on speaking to those primarily women was that the stronger that their sense of purpose was with controlling their children's technology use, and the more in touch they were with their values, the easier it was for them to impose those rules and also to tolerate when their children would act up as a result. So that's something that I always really encourage parents to take the time to really reconnect with. What are my values, and how do I envision the role that technology is going to play in my life, in my child's life, in my family's life, and then let that guide you. Number three is help kids see the dollar signs. And by that, I mean something that I was talking about during my first episode on here about digital wellness is it's important for children to understand, and this is something that I mentioned in that interview. Um, Teaching kids that access to their time, attention, and privacy is being monetized is, I think, one half of the most important technology use lessons. The other one is that they are in charge of how they share these precious resources because they are precious. They're becoming increasingly precious. And again, some of the moms who I interviewed for this blog series that I just mentioned, they've all spent dedicated time talking to their kids about things like persuasive design and the attention economy. And their kids are all below the age of 8 at this point. So they've been talking to them about this for years. Number four, accompany your kids. This is what I mentioned before. Co-using, co-viewing is really, really important. They really need to know that someone is there not only to monitor and supervise them, which of course we need to do as well, but also to really protect and advocate for them when that is necessary. They need to feel that sense of safety, that in case something goes wrong, there's somebody there who they can talk to and be honest with. And we know, unfortunately, not just a lot of children, but a lot of adults also end up stumbling on very inappropriate or very disturbing content online. It happens all the time. And then finally, again, to model the best and the most desired behaviors. Parents do this anyway. If you're a parent, you do this with everything, with driving, with consuming alcohol or not consuming alcohol, with food habits, with politeness and how you talk to other people. You're already teaching your kids how to do all of these different things. I think one of the most important things that we need to teach them now in this age is really how to be kind of healthy, responsible, knowledgeable digital citizens. We didn't necessarily choose this, but it's kind of been placed on us. So we really kind of we have to dedicate a significant amount of time to teaching them about all these different things. I wanted to throw in a very quick tip for you as we slowly wrap up. The concept of deliciously digital. I think you'll all agree that at times it's incredibly difficult to resist getting on our devices, consuming the content that's inside of them. I'm definitely not the first one to suggest conceptualizing the consumption of digital content as the consumption of food. I'm absolutely not the first one, but this is one way in which I kind of like to help parents explain this, especially to very young kids. So if you do have a very young child, this is something I would recommend that you do to really conceptualize technology a lot like food. That some types of food are good for us, and we have lots of those, maybe unlimited amounts. Some foods are bad for us, but we can get away with having them sometimes. And then some are just dangerous, and we never have those ones. And of course, again, based on food preferences, food intolerances, allergies, culture, all sorts of different things, this will look different for each family. But I think this concept is a really nice and simple one that we can follow when it comes to educating children about how we're going to consume technology together, or how they're one day going to consume it on their own. As an example, something that I always put in the dangerous section is allowing a child to sit in the room alone and watch YouTube with autoplay on, especially very, very, very young children. So that's something we never want to do. And I can't even tell you how many kind of horror stories I've heard from parents when their 2 and 3 and 4 year olds stumbled on really horrific content online while doing that. So that would definitely kind of fall into the category of dangerous, but I really encourage you again to conceptualize this kind of based on your own values. This was a document that I put together. If you would like a downloadable version of it, please reach out to me, email me. I will send it to you. You can also find it on my website under the section of recommended readings and resources. I put this together for an event called Screen Free Week, which unfortunately this year will have to be delayed because of everything that is going on. So I'm not recommending this to you now for the purpose of being literally screen free, although there are families who are still trying to do that. Of course, it's very difficult to do that right now, but we can call it a screen minimal week this time, if you like. And I just wanted to give you some ideas about how to do that, and not just how, but really why. What are the reasons why we want to try and limit screen use as much as we can? Like I said, right now it's very hard to do because all of us are relying on our devices in order to do pretty much everything. But this can be something you can pick out one day of the week to do. You can pick a weekend to do it. You can even do it during kind of different blocks of the day. It can be mornings, it can be evenings, whatever it is. But I just wanted to give you some ideas for how you could do that in case you're really starting to feel that digital overload. I know that I certainly am, even though I'm kind of enjoying having this time with you and having done this every Monday morning. There have been a number of articles. I just quickly wanted to address that have suggested that any types of screen rules or digital rules are out the window right now. And I really have to say I disagree with that. This is research that's just come out about the situation that we're currently in and what is happening with children's apps and the different services based on their devices. And you can see how much usage has shot up. We're seeing something like an increase in nearly 70%. And for the most part, you can see that red line, which is tablet use actually. And while some kids do use their tablets for educational purposes, a lot of the times they use it for entertainment purposes and for communication purposes. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean that this is horrible and we need to cancel any form of tech use. Absolutely not. But we really need to pay attention to what it is that they're doing on those tablets for such long periods of time. We can't just leave them be and just let them use unlimited amounts of screen time. One of the main reasons for that being that we have no clue how long we're going to be in this current situation. Maybe another 2 months. It may last until the end of the year. It may go into the next year. So this is true for us as adults as well as for children. Now is exactly the time when we have to start thinking about our technology use and how to control it, of course, as best as we can, given the current situation. Um, there have been some really kind of wonderful examples of co-using and co-viewing during this physical distancing period. And this was one comment that came up on one of the parenting groups that I'm part of. This is a mom who is sharing the fact that she's been spending a lot of time playing with her kids, Roblox, Fortnite, and so on. She's also saying just how beneficial it's been for her kids because they're able to socialize with their friends. And this, of course, is something that we would definitely encourage, again, within kind of reason. And that means observing your children and kind of noticing how their behavior or their emotions are changing around tech use and detecting when they've had a little bit too much or when they're engaging either in inappropriate behavior, maybe waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning in order to play some of these games, right? That's when the line has been crossed. And that's when we kind of need to pull things in and build up those boundaries or reinstate those boundaries, really. And this was a post that was shared on LinkedIn with a person who is my one of my contacts. They work from home, and they had created a whole list of rules for their children, and then their children came back with this set of rules, because they're also, of course, doing a lot of work from home. They're doing all of their learning from home, and so they felt that parents need to have some rules in this digital age as well about what their best behaviors are as well. So I think that's one of the most important takeaways as well, is that it really is a two-way street. Again, I think that this time right now is a wonderful time to give our children a little bit more of a sense of independence on the one hand, to really teach them about the best ways to use technology, and to understand what good tech use versus not so great tech use, and horrible tech use looks like, but also to give them a little bit more of a sense of agency, and to kind of allow them to let us know what they need from us, what kind of support they need from us in order to be able to use their tech in the best ways possible. So I'm going to wrap up there. I'm going to go back to our little chat here. Thank you all for saying hi. Good morning to all of you who are on our US time zone. Be sure to, like I said before, get in touch if you would like any more information about any of these resources that I shared with you. On the YouTube channel of Made of Millions, you'll also be able to have a look at my previous 3 episodes. So during the first one, I talked about some of the key concepts within digital wellness. Then in the second one, I was talking about our social brain and social media, and how some of these social needs of our brain play out in social media, and whether social media really satisfies these needs at all. And then last week, I was talking about children and technology. So this week, we're talking about parenting in the age of technology. And next week, for the very final episode, I'm very sorry to say, I will be talking about technology within our classrooms and within our workplaces. Again, we're getting a lot of very interesting information, a lot of interesting statistics about how we're starting to use technology in this kind of very, very strange new situation, but also the kinds of impacts that it's having on us. And I think it's, again, very important to use this time to really conceptualize how we're going to be using technology for the purposes of working and learning once all of this is over. I'm going to try and thank you so much, Connie. I really appreciate that. I wanted to share with you guys, let's see if this is going to work. The link, okay, I think it should have worked both on Facebook and YouTube. So this is the link to the Digital Flourishing survey that's literally been released, maybe I think about 3 or 4 days ago or something like that last week, that I would really encourage you to go to. You can share this with your family members, your friends, any clients you work with. It's not a very long survey, so it won't take up too much of your digital time, but it will give you a very nice kind of outlay of what your technology use looks like, and how it impacts different aspects of your life, the physical, the mental, the social, and a number of other ones. So I think with that, we'll wrap it up. Again, if you have any further questions about anything I talked about, please be sure to get in touch with me. You can send me an email. I will try my best to respond as soon as I can. And I hope I will see you next week, when we're going to be talking about technology use in the classroom and in the workplace. Thank you, and I hope you stay safe and healthy.